was very high functioning. I had, I was a PhD candidate, and I was raised to follow the law, trust people. I had gobs of pro-social behavior patterns. I was raised not to lie, not to break the law. I'd never smoked a cigarette. I'd never gotten drunk. I had speeding tickets, but I mean, that was the extent of my problem with the law. I had shoveled stalls. I had sold poinsettias. I had taught at a university. I had been a counselor. I had done a whole lot of things and fit in fine everywhere in my life except prison. So I had a lot of adjustments and difficulty making those adjustments. It was a very traumatic experience for me.
The fundamental stages of adulthood were spent behind bars in prison. My mom and family were really close and stayed in contact and wrote letters and visit and just everything. I mean, we grew closer because of the situation, and had no doubt that I would never do a thing like this. And so it was just sad to watch her do everything that she could to try and save me from everything that was going on, and everything she did fell on deaf ears. I always say I know what it feels like to be wrongfully accused and incarcerated for a crime you didn't commit, but I don't know how it feels to be a mother and to watch your child go through that, and you do all that you can to save your child, and everything you do goes unanswered. I don't know how that feels, but she does.
For me, it got worse because I was constantly in my mind trying to stay out of prison. And some days I just couldn't do it and I just wanted to scream. It was hard. Being away from my children and just being in such a regimented, inhumane environment that you never get used to. It's just one step at a time. I get to the maximum prison and I'm stuck in a 8x6 concrete cell with a window that barely opens, and it's got bars over it, and there's metal bunk beds and a crunchy plastic mattress and crunchy plastic pillow and a tin toilet with no cover on it, and you have to survive. It's hard.
But tonight we're here to honor Professor Steve Beckett of the University of Illinois College of Law for his incredible devotion to pro bono service for the past several years on behalf of our longest-held clients, Michael Slover Sr., Michael Slover Jr., and Jeanette Slover.
I saw Michael Slover Jr. on Wednesday. I had another client who was in Lawrence Correction Center, and Jr. was not expecting me. My students and I had seen Jeanette on Tuesday, and it just so happened that I was able to see Junior on Wednesday. And I know that Jeanette won't mind me saying this, because I asked her what she wanted me to say, and she told me that she wanted me to tell Michael Jr. that she would give $1 million to hug him.
The prison is supposed to be a rehabilitation for people, right? But not. I mean, not many people made it like those people. A lot of them commit suicide because they said they see no hope and they see no chance of getting their freedom back. And those who was strong enough to confront that were able to make it back. And I think when you hear, it's kind of like don't really understand what's going inside. Inside, you had no voice, you had no right, you had no whatsoever. You confine and you are subjected to their rules and protocol in the system.
My family is, I come from a very strong family. We don't fall apart, we trust, and people know who you are. My family, we know who you are. We know what you would do and won't do. And they knew I didn't do this, so there was no question. Family is the vice to all things, you know, whether you know it or not. Family is a vice that keeps you grounded, it keeps you respectable, it keeps you doing the right things, you know, and it was damaging to my family as well. You know, some of my kids suffered because of it. My mother's health got bad because of it, you know, and me being like the alpha male in the family, you know, I was the one that everybody kind of, you know, looked toward and depended on. So it kind of put her in a bad way, you know. It passed 2 years ago, actually, and prior to my mom passing, when I came home in 2002, in 2003 I was able to give my mother a kidney, and the kidney kept my mother all the way up until 2 years ago. And so it's a lot, you know, and it took a lot, you know, from me not to have those moments in those years with my mother and come home to absolutely nothing. But being in prison, you know, with the lighting and the things that happens in prison, your physical get bad. That I got while I was in prison. Now, where did it come from? Could have came from water. Could have came from, you know, the filthy environment that we're in. There was no ventilation. We stayed locked up 23 hours a day. You know, and the only air you got was something that blew through the window. You know, and you can look on the floor and pick up dust with your hand. It's so filthy in them prisons. And you pick up dust with your hand, you know, and some people just get sick from asthma. The air is so bad. It's dangerous in the institution. It's you know, it's nowhere where you really want to stay. It is trauma. It is trauma. I've watched guys get murdered. I watched guys get raped. I watched guys get beat up, beaten half to death. That's trauma. And you see it on the regular. I was standing in my cell one day, getting ready to go on a visit, and the guard blew a guy's brains out. Just like that, and his blood went so high in the air, it was all over my uniform. To where they came and took my uniform. The security did. They took my uniform and brought me a brand new one. Just so we wouldn't, you know, witness what we just saw. Then they locked us down, you know, and it's sad. It's sad, the things you go through. And then the abuse, the verbal and the physical abuse that you encountered dealing with officers. And some of them have racial side to it, you know, and they don't like you because you're black. They don't like you because you're Hispanic, or they don't like you because you're white, you know, or you may be gay. They don't like you, you know, for whatever reason it is, you end up getting your brain stumped out. Nobody even know it. Then they blame it on the inmate. You know, after 5 or 6 of them beat you half to death, which, you know, they jumped on me before in the county jail and in the institution, you know, and I mean, it's bad. So
my mom, my grandma passed away when I was in prison. My mom, my grandma, and my uncle. Now my dad, he standing by me, but at the time my dad was on drugs. He'd been on drugs about 20 years. He no longer on drugs. I became angry at the world because I was in prison for something I didn't do. So I gave up on my faith, and just for about 7 years, I didn't really care about nothing. And my grandma passed in 2008. Then I started writing to all the innocent projects, law firms, because I didn't no longer want to be in prison. I started back praying in 2008. I started going to Islamic service. I started praying 5 times a day. I said the same prayer 5 times a day. I asked Allah. Well, I didn't ask. I majority told Allah, you know I need to do this and get me out of here.
I went, after being convicted, I was sentenced to death. and I went to one of the most notorious prisons in the United States, the Maryland Penitentiary at 954 4th Street in Baltimore City, with gray granite 20-foot thick stones and silver spires reaching up to the sky. Looked just like something right out of Dracula. And I did that little shuffle that you do when you got handcuffs and chains on. I remember going through the yard and I could hear the cat calls coming. We're going to get you, Kurt. We're going to do to you what you did to that little girl. Over and over. I could hear it coming from the vents in my cell. And this place they stuck me in was as wide as my hands could reach doing this, and I could just touch the wall by going like that. I could take 3 steps from the back of the wall where my toilet was and be at the cell door. A stainless steel toilet sat in the one corner, and there was a flat piece of metal welded together which had a Naugahyde mattress that only had half of the cotton wadding in it. I never had a mattress to sleep on for 2 months. I just wadded up my clothes and threw them down on the bunk, and that 400-pound cell door shut like the slamming of a tailgate of a dump truck. A styrofoam cup was placed in this little feed-up slot. That's what they used to do when they came through. Feed up, like somehow we were animals, but we could speak English. And he opened the slot and he put the styrofoam cup that was supposed to be full of spaghetti, and it was a half-eaten tomato. And I remember throwing that back and crawling under my bunk and crying myself to sleep, trying not to let anybody hear. Dishonorably discharged Marine, and I thought I was tough. I had yet to see what tough was all about. Prison is a bad place with a lot of bad people, and I have to tell you, this place smelled like pain. I can physically tell you, and I can tell you with all honesty, that I know what pain smells like. I know what hatred smells like, because I've smelled it. You ever been in an energized situation where people are getting upset at you, and people are starting to argue, and you can feel it? It's like electricity, except the stench is foul. Pain and anguish is something that you see in a funeral home when somebody's killed. But this was every day. Hatred is that which you have against somebody, like a regime or something. Somebody that done something really bad, but this was my life, and it was living right next to me. The penitentiary was full of these people, and most of the time, in circles that I always traveled in, you don't make friends in prison. You make acquaintances. And I was accused and tried and convicted of one of the most heinous crimes in the state's history, of killing of Dawn Hamilton. Now, I have to tell you that I didn't know what to do or who to turn to, but I was scared. I was always looking over my shoulder because his cat calls still kept coming. I was in my cell one night, and the place just smelled bad. It was full of not just the pain and the hatred, but you could smell the BO and the funk of this joint. Roaches and rats about the size of a small cat. You know, roaches were everywhere. I remember this night I was sitting in my bunk, and I got I would learn to love to read. I became an avid reader. And I was reading this magazine, and I was laying there on my bunk with my face hitting the ceiling, you know, looking up at the ceiling, and it was just one bunk flat, and you could see the ceiling of the cell, and then the lights went out. And when I say the lights went out, the power went off, and there was no ambient light. It was just like if you snapped the lights off in this place. I couldn't see your hand in front of your face. That's how dark it was. So I'm sitting there, and then the other convicts upstairs started screaming and hollering, started stuffing stuff down in their toilets and flushing the toilets. And this cascade of the most incredible stuff kept flowing around the bars of my cell. And it wasn't paper. And these things kept hitting him in the face and in the mouth and in the ears, and I'm brushing them off. And in the chest, and people are screaming. Now they're lighting fires now and shaking the bars, and smoke is everywhere. Acrid smoke They're setting the Bibles on fire, their Qurans and everything. I'm looking down at here with my mirror, and it's just like the closest thing out of hell. And they're shaking the bars, and these things keep hitting me in the face and in the mouth. And the power pops back on. And I'm not kidding, folks. There was a sea of cockroaches swimming across my ceiling like a wave. I used to take wads of toilet paper and stick them in my ears so they wouldn't crawl in there and lay eggs. But this was my life. You talk about pain. The darkest day, outside of the reality I was in prison for something I didn't do, was my mother died before the DNA results came back. My priest came to see me in prison and told me the sad news. I got to see her body for 5 minutes in handcuffs and shackles because I had such a good record in prison. I kissed her goodbye and went back to prison an innocent man. And this was my life.
We stayed in contact in multiple ways. We stayed in contact via writing, and we stayed in contact via phone calls as well as visits. What I would do is I would bring him food packages, and I would also send him money to put on his account so he could buy from the commissary or the canteen, if you would, so he could get his personal hygiene and cosmetics, as they would say. It affected the family in such that it was more of a financial burden now. It was a financial burden because I knew that he needed to be supported. And so with the food packages and the money being sent and the visits and so forth to see how he was doing, there were some family members that didn't come. I'll tell you that tragically, unfortunately, where he was in Northern State, they were living in Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is approximately 20 minutes away. There were some that had not seen him in 14 years, which is sad. But I stayed in constant communication with him, even to the point, even though I lived in Pennsylvania at the time, I still remained in contact with him. The phone was another viable tool for him. So he would call me, collect, and we would just talk until the phone would say, you've got 30 seconds, and on their end, it would cut it off. It got to the point where, unfortunately, the Department of Corrections used this as a means of, I guess, generating revenue. So you'd get this exorbitant phone bill because they would charge you an ungodly amount of cost for a collect call, which is totally, enormously higher than it would if it was on the outside. So it got to the place where that was too cost prohibitive. I said, Gerard, listen, what we have to do is I'm going to come see you, and I'll come visit you more. I'd rather take the money and give that to you for inside, for your cosmetics and things of that nature, as opposed to giving it to the telephone company. Because you get a phone bill, it's almost $400 for that month. You know, that you can't sustain that kind of cost for any long duration. So that's how we stayed in contact. With my mom, she would come out and visit and had come out to visit, but because she'd become older in age, she wasn't able to move around. She has had surgery, knee replacement on both one of her knees, and so that was problematic in terms of trying to get around. And the fact that when it's time to go visit, they take you through this long, arduous process to even just get into the facility, that it treats you like you're a criminal trying to get in. And so that was too taxing for her. So it got to a place where she would come out and visit him, and the siblings that did believe him would come out and visit him, and so was his children. But it got to a place where she could no longer do it. And so we just had to continue to share that responsibility. Tragic that you had 19 years of birthdays missed, Christmas, watching your children grow up, grandkids, the whole ball of wax, and particularly loved ones who passed on.
My mother, she was such, man, I'm telling you, that was my biggest cheerleader in school as a youngster. As a grown person, she was my biggest cheerleader, and it's like she never gave up. And for me to come home and see my mother's face and to know that, you know what I'm saying, I was blessed to come home, because I look at it like all the family that I lost, one of them could have actually been my mother, but she was able to be there and watch me go through that fight, watch me come home, and that was such a blessing, because a lot of people didn't get that opportunity. A lot of people lost their mom. I lost a lot of people around me, as far as family-wise, but I didn't lose my mother, and that was such a blessing. She was my biggest cheerleader. And I had such good people in my life that study check on me and make sure I'm okay. And it's like, I just don't want to be the statistic. I don't want to be a statistic. I want to be a story. I try not to live and keep talking about being incarcerated because it's a part of your life that you want to forget, but you never forget. The day I walked out of prison was like being born again, you know, and that's how it feels to walk out of there knowing, man, and the air, it's like two different airs. It's like when you walk out, it's truly like you being born again. Like, man, my life, you know, I had life, you know, as opposed to being on the other side, you don't feel like that. You feel lifeless. So the feeling to be around people that I know that help me and that fought for me to come home, to embrace my family again, to be around my family, to be able to eat what I want, you know. You can go to the bathroom when you want. You can shower when you want. You can basically walk out the door when you want. It's like life all over again. It's like being born again. It's a feeling that, it's hard to describe that feeling because it's so many different emotions. You happy and sad. You happy that you obtain your freedom, but you're sad to have to go or have to been through what you've been through.
He was someone who was destined to go play in the NFL. One of the saddest things I heard about Brian, and Brian didn't hear it, and I don't even know if I've ever told him it, but was when he was doing a tryout for the Chargers, and a Chargers coach looking at him, running up and down the field, and saying, had this kid gone to USC the way he was supposed to, and gone through that system, he wouldn't just be playing in the NFL, he'd be a Hall of Famer. Because even after 10 years of not playing football, and even after not having any college training, and even after not playing his senior year of high school football, he still belongs on an NFL field. And that's both tragic and awesome at the same time. I was so heartened to hear the senator talk about that we're in a post-Willie Horton world. I really hope that that's true.
I spent 6 birthdays behind bars. My 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd birthday. I had an unfortunate opportunity of watching my teammates go on to receive scholarships to universities and play football. I had the unfortunate opportunity of watching my classmates go on to enjoy prom and walk across the stage as they received their diplomas and graduating from high school. And I had the unfortunate opportunity of watching some of my teammates, as well as guys that I played football with and went to camps with, play football on a big stage on TV, while I watched from a cell on a 9-inch black and white TV. This was my life for a crime that I did not commit.
And in '78, I was going to be 55 years old, and I was retiring. So I wrote a letter to the senior chaplain there. His name was David Ledford, an Episcopalian. And I told him about my interest in, after I retire, if there were any vacancies. And I wrote the letter Monday. Wednesday he called me, he said, we're interviewing for an opening. I can fit you in if you're interested. That's how I became a staff chaplain at Stateville. And there were 5 staff chaplains at the time. We had more than any other institution in the state who were on the payroll for the Department of Corrections. I never felt any sense of danger. It was more dangerous for the correctional officers than it was for us as chaplains, because we had no problems. Correctional officers would be stabbed or have stuff thrown on them through the cells. This is especially in the segregation units where the guys were locked up all day long. They might get 1 hour, get a shower every few days, and they would go to the yard. They have a certain yard where they were confined, maybe for an hour. But 23 hours a day locked up in a cell can do something to your mind. And these are the guys that I visited most of the time. So the electric chair was there in this unit. And at the time, when I started, there were 4 men on death row. By the time Ryan abolished the death, it was Ryan who abolished the death penalty, there was 167 men. It's a bad place to be. I wouldn't. Some young folks, young kids, I had a young kid tell me, will you call my grandmother, tell her what kind of place this is? And there's nothing grandmother could do. What made me sad is to see parents spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on their kids for nothing, because they're not going to get out. It took a toll on the families for sure, and it still does for families who care. I talked to a sister of a guy who's been locked up 45 years just a few days ago, and she's been sending him money every year. He's been locked up over 45 years. His daughter is 45 years old, and she was an infant when he got locked up. A lot of violence occurs. Rape. I've counseled with youngsters who got there and are raped, and they try to commit suicide. Yeah. Bad place to be. Bad place to be. It's a horrible thing to be incarcerated for something you didn't do. It's a horrible thing to be incarcerated for something you did, but when you're innocent, I can just imagine the hurt. And keep it up.